Down here. Not looking up your towel, swear to God. Not looking up your towel, not looking at your funny business.
So hey guys, I hope you can hear that. I have a dehumidifier in the background, so I apologize if you couldn't hear it. That's a quote from the movie Ted, which came out in 2012. And as most of you probably know by clicking on this video, Ted 2 has finally come out and it's finally hit theaters. Let's review it for you today. So in Ted 2, it takes place, I don't know, maybe roughly a year after the first movie. And I'm going to try and make this a non-spoiler review as much as I can. And, non-spoiler story as well, but for the synopsis. We hear that John got divorced through Lori. But for the good news for Ted is that him and Tami-Lynn, who was his girlfriend in the first Ted movie, they are finally getting married, and so they get married. And they're at the point in their marriage where they want to have a kid. But through events and through, paperwork and through, ways of finding out how Ted and Tami-Lynn could have a kid, since obviously Ted's a teddy bear and Tami-Lynn's a human, they find out that Ted is not considered a human in the eyes of the law. He's not really viewed as a person or a human by the government. He's viewed as his property. And so what he has to do to really have a kid with Tami-Lynn is he has to take the problem to the courtroom and hope that he can win through a case proving that he's a human with a soul like everybody else and not just a toy from a store. So overall, guys, I really did like Ted 2 a lot. It's not quite as successful as the first Ted film. I thought the first Ted film was a little more original, more different for its time. It was interesting to see how Seth MacFarlane was going to handle live action because, he did animation for so many years, and Ted was kind of his first big trip over into live action storytelling. So that was a more interesting take, I guess, for back then. But this is a very good sequel. I think Ted 2 has a lot of things that you would really want a Ted sequel to have, and ultimately that's what kind of made the experience of Ted 2 for me really fun to have in the cinema. So for my positives and negatives of Ted 2, I think Ted 2's messages about being human was really successful, and it really worked really well in the movie. There's a lot of things that happen before, during, and once the movie is finished that really kind of make the point of what it's like to be human. There's a character by Morgan Freeman in this movie that has a very good monologue in the movie about being human, and I think that really hits home for what Ted 2 was trying to be about as far as messages go. The story elements that really worked well in the first Ted film are continued here, and they actually work pretty well. So all the little Family Guy-isms, all the little, pop culture and 80s references that Seth MacFarlane likes to make in his movies. Seth MacFarlane has admitted through several interviews that he's a fan of musicals, and that's very, prominent here. There's a lot of references to classic musicals and, scenes that turn into musicals on occasion, and they actually work pretty well, and they don't feel out of place at all. They feel like they belong in the movie. So I guess that's really just going to show how the first elements of the first Ted film really work as elements in the second Ted film as well. Seth MacFarlane's special touch is very much here. Like I said, there's a lot of Family Guy-isms in the film. You could definitely tell that Seth MacFarlane was a part of the script, and obviously as the director of this film as well. His special touch is very prominent here, and it was just really great to see that back for a Ted sequel. Ted 2 is also a good example of good CGI use in a movie. I'm technically not a huge fan of CGI, but I think when it's done right, it can be something really special done on a movie. And I think Ted 2 very much used CGI in the right way that it could. Ted really does feel believable. He really does feel like he can interact and touch and do all these things in these rooms that we see him do in the movie. So huge thumbs up to the CGI artists of the movie. Ted 2 works very well as far as good CGI goes, and when CGI is necessary, which Ted 2 very much approached it that way. It didn't try to always use CGI. It only used it when it needed it to, which is mostly for the scenes that did involve Ted doing a lot of things within the room he was in. Speaking of the musical elements of the movie that Seth MacFarlane likes to have in his stories and in his TV shows as well, there's an opening credits in this movie that work kind of like a musical, and I think they work very well. So for those who are looking for like a really interesting way to open up a movie, I think Ted 2 very much does this. There's also some very effective comedy here. Some of these laughs really hit hard with the audience. So there's a lot of jokes here that really work really well. So if you're those who like the first Ted film, I think you're going to have a lot of fun with this movie because it is a very funny film. There's also some very awesome cameos in the movie. I'm not going to spoil who it is, but look for the grocery store scene where there's a very special cameo in the grocery store. And there's also tons of other cameos throughout the movie. Some of these cameos are very much done in like a Family Guy-esque kind of manner. I guess the best way to say this is like somebody says a sarcastic remark in one scene, and that sarcastic remark about that person actually does involve that person in the scene. So I guess that's the best way to say it without ruining it. So look for these really awesome cameos in the film. Ted 2 has a lot of them, just like the first film did. Now for my negatives of Ted 2. Overall, I don't think this film's as good as the original Ted. Like I mentioned that in the opening of the video. I think overall, the first Ted is a more fulfilling movie. I think the comedy hits a little harder in that movie overall. But still, I think Ted 2 is a great continuation of the first film. So for those who are looking for that great continuation, it did happen here. But like I said, don't go in expecting something better than the first Ted film. I thought the overall comedy of Ted 2 wasn't quite as impactful as it was in the first film, because I remember when the jokes really worked in the first Ted film, because I did see the first Ted in the theater as well on opening weekend for that. Those jokes really hit hard, and they really were extremely funny when they worked really well. Ted 2 has those occasional moments, but those jokes don't make as big of an impact as they did in the first Ted film. I don't know if it's just the audience I was with or what the problem was. But overall, I felt the jokes in this film didn't make as much of an impact as much as they did in the first film. Maybe that's just because it's a sequel and we've seen this kind of thing done before. I really don't know quite the reason why these comedy moments aren't as impactful as they were in the first film, but it's something that I've noticed that might wear the experience down maybe a little bit for some people. The third act of the film felt kind of sloppy and retreaded of what the first film did, and that's really too bad because I thought the first two acts of Ted 2 did something different than what the first Ted film did. It explored different territory, which I think a sequel should definitely do. It should always explore something new and different, which, like I said, the first two acts of Ted 2 did accomplish. But by the time we get to Act 3, it's definitely something that we've already seen, and I don't know if I needed that done a second time. And for those who see the movie, you're going to know what I'm talking about. The way they did it, I don't feel like they had to do it again, and they chose to do it again. So, third act of the movie, not anything special. There's also some incomplete character arcs in the movie. There's a character in this film that came back from the first film that really was only in the movie for like 30 seconds. There's a lot of other characters here too where like they're in the movie, but there's really not much of a complete character arc for them. And that's mostly with the supporting characters. You know, characters like John and Ted and Amanda Seyfried's character, who's new to this movie. All of them obviously have completed arcs because they're such big, important characters. But for the smaller characters, they just kind of disappear into the story. And I really don't like how MacFarlane did that this time. While in the first film, he really kind of gave closure to everything. And that's something that I wish Ted 2 had a little bit more of. But overall, I'm going to give Ted 2 a 9 out of 10. I think it's a very funny film, and for those who like the first Ted film, you're going to have a lot of fun with this movie. I certainly had a lot of fun, as you can tell by my 9 out of 10 rating. For those who didn't like the first Ted film, you could probably just ignore this one because it's basically just a continuation of the first movie. But like I said, very fun film. If you like Ted, if you like Seth MacFarlane, it's worth checking out. Huge thumbs up for me. You know who you are. If you like Seth MacFarlane, you're probably going to have fun with this. If you don't like Seth MacFarlane, this might not be the best choice for you.